Saints 2-round mock draft, best player available or position of need. We are here after further review with Matt Moscona. Not going to lie, can't really hear through the beanie. Probably shouldn't have worn it, but we're too late now. We're too far into the video. Let's go right into it.
Dane Brugler over at The Athletic has a 2-round mock draft out. Obviously, this is a time where with the draft deadline, the declaration deadline ending on Monday, the 15th, now, because the draft pool of players is set, we know which players are in the draft. You're going to start to see more mock drafts. So Dane Brugler put out a 2-round mock draft, and of course the Saints have 2 picks in the first 2 rounds. They're
True. Very true. We have 2 picks in the first 2 rounds. First pick is in the 14th slot. Now let me address this idea of best player available or position of need. Why not both? It seems like it's so simple, doesn't it? It seems like it's the simplest possible thing. Draft the best player available if they fit a position you need. Easy. Easy clap. Really easy thing. And if you're sitting there and you're like, well, kind of want to go with this guy, kind of want to go with that guy, who's the better player? That easy. Overcomplicating the draft is something that happens a lot. Like, it's something you see a lot from fans. It's something you see a lot from teams. They try and nail these draft picks. They try and force everything into these really tight funnels, these really tight filters, and come up with the best player. And then when you do that, it makes it harder to land on a prospect. The best way to do it, I've said it a million times, take the best prospect. Luckily for the Saints, that best prospect is probably going to also be a position of need because you need everything. The Saints need every single position. It's kind of funny because the only position the Saints really don't need in the first round is a quarterback. And I think that's what people, when they say best player available, I think they're using that synonymously with a quarterback. We don't need a quarterback. And, lucky for us, at our slot of 14, more than likely, the best player available won't be a quarterback. More than likely, Caleb Williams isn't falling. More than likely, Drake May isn't falling. Bo Nix, if he's there at 14, he's not the best player available, and he's not a position of need, right? The best player available at that slot, let's say it's Malik Neighbors. Let's say he falls. Okay, that's a position of need. Sure. Is it the highest position of need? No. But we definitely need a wide receiver to fill the vacating Michael Thomas, right? Okay. Let's say Jared Verse is there. Boom. Perfect. Probably the best player available and definitely a position of need. We need a pass rusher. So the Saints do need a lot of different things, and more than likely, the best player at 14 will fill those needs. So don't overthink this if you're the Saints. Rank your prospects. Let it rip. Don't try and get cute. Don't try and get cute and take Bo Nix or Michael Penix if he's there because you're thinking, well, maybe we can develop him. Maybe he's a quarterback of the future. Because if you take a Bo Nix or a Michael Penix in the first round, all you're doing is forfeiting your first round pick, pretty much, as far as like the impact that it will have on the upcoming season. Because Derek Carr is the starting quarterback.
They're picking 14 overall, and then they have the Broncos' 2nd-round pick, which is 45 overall. Thanks a lot to the Broncos for actually getting good later in the season. And I don't necessarily marry myself to the idea of a mock draft because of who the player is. I more look at, is there a consensus on position? What position might a team be targeting in round 1? Not necessarily the player. And what's been really interesting is as we've looked at a lot of these mock drafts, there doesn't seem to be a real consensus on player or position for the Saints. We talked about.
Well, I think because the Saints need a lot of stuff. Like some people are locked into a position. Sometimes it just makes sense. You know, sometimes they'll have a young quarterback who's getting hit a lot. So then everyone's consensus is they need an offensive lineman. Everyone's consensus of, okay, they're picking at the 7th slot. Which offensive lineman will be there? Boom, plug them in. It's usually that easy. All right, it's usually just that simple. The Saints that's not the case. The Saints can go a bunch of different directions. And even with positions where we seemingly are good, like wide receiver, we can use depth. And it's always good to add top tier depth. That's why best player available is the move. Then you can trickle it down to like a priority list of how, you know, the how good you think those players are in your own list. Just because they're the best player available on Mel Kiper's list or Todd McShay's list or whoever, doesn't mean they're the same on the Saints list. And that's where our evaluators have to, do their job.
About a CBS Sports mock draft yesterday that had the Saints taking Brock Bowers at 14 overall.
That would be interesting. Brock Bowers is the tight end out of Georgia. That's an interesting. So let's talk about Brock Bowers. So Brock Bowers is a position of need. The Saints do need let's say, if you've taken Brock Bowers at 14, you think he's going to be an elite tight end, right? The Saints have a bunch of tight ends. They don't have an elite tight end. Derek Carr, giving Derek Carr another weapon, giving Derek Carr a playmaker, and let's just say Brock Bowers is really good. Let's say he is a top 15-ish tight end. Let's say he's a super strong tight end in his career. Adding that to the weapon pool that Derek Carr has, pretty solid. So if all hell breaks loose, and we don't have any defensive ends we like there, we don't have any offensive linemen we like there, or any run stoppers, anything like that, any offensive linemen that slide, I'd be totally fine with Brock Bowers. And I think he's a good example of a best player available and a position of need, where you can look at both and you can say, well, yeah, he absolutely could fill that need. Because we tried to fill it with Foster Moreau and Juwan Johnson and Jimmy Graham, and it didn't work. So let's bring in a tried and true young tight end. Give Derek Carr that guy. Derek Carr's been favorable to tight ends in his career. Bowers would be a really interesting pick. That would be a great pick compared to Penix or Nix or someone like that. That would be a really out of the box pick, but it'd be a great pick. Another thing you got to factor in with the Saints that isn't possible now, but it will be hopefully soon, is you got to factor in the offensive coordinator. So if we bring in an offensive coordinator, and I'm just going to speak in hypotheticals here. If we bring in an offensive coordinator who wants to run the football, and his whole plan is based on establish the run and then go off play action, you're going to assume, like, well, we're probably going to take an offensive lineman then, because we're going to have to run the football, and we cannot run the football right now. So if we got this offensive coordinator, we're getting him to run his scheme, run his system. We're going to do everything we can to make that system work. So that'll be something else that we have to factor in as far as like who we bring in, what their scheme is, what their system is. Do we have glaring holes on our offense that doesn't make that system possible right now? And then can we address it? Doesn't guarantee we would, but that's another way to kind of figure out what are we thinking front office wise.
Well, Dane Brugler at 14 has the Saints taking Jared Verse, the defensive end out of Florida State. Now,
Jared Verse, so when we first did a mock draft, Jared Verse was my pick. We can't rush the passer. We cannot pressure the quarterback. We cannot get sacks. Let's get a good pass rusher. Jared Verse, great pass rusher. The fella out of Alabama, blanking on his name. He's a great pass rusher. Get him. Having them paired up with Carl Granderson on the edges, all of a sudden, okay. With Brian Brzee in the middle, all of a sudden, hold on a second. Saints defensive line's kind of right there if you land on the pass rusher. So Jared Verse, another one. Could be the best player available at the time. Could be position of need. And let's say, now you may be wondering to yourself, you might say, well, James, what do you do if you have both players ranked the same? What if you score Brock Bowers an 82? And what if you score Jared Verse an 82? Well, anybody want to guess? You rank or prioritize your positions by how much you need that position. That can be a bevy of different things. How bad it is currently. It could be how important it is for the scheme next year. Could be all those things. So depends on how. I would assume the Saints probably think we need to address pass rush more than we need to address the tight end, because we have Foster Moreau, Juwan Johnson, all the guys in the room. So I'm sure if that was the situation and they had them graded equally, it probably would be Jared Verse.
Now, on its face, I would love that. I would love to get an elite edge rusher on this roster. I mean, you had one in Trey Hendrickson, and you let him walk. I mean, you decided to pay the wrong guy.
Yeah.
You drafted Peyton Turner. You drafted Marcus Davenport. This year, you used a second-round pick on an edge. and you've missed. Isaiah Foskey didn't give you much of anything this year as a rookie. You've drafted a bunch of those guys, and you've missed. The one guy that you hit on, Trey Hendrickson, who was awesome, you decided not to pay. Another reason why I look at the Saints organization going, what are you actually doing?
Yeah, that was a big whoopsie.
Not only can you not evaluate college talent, you can't even evaluate your own roster and make sensible decisions. But Jared Verse would be incredible. I just think you have much bigger needs on the offensive side of the ball, namely offensive line, where you could be losing Pete, Hurst, and Ramczyk after this year. And Trevor Penning, while they may not be giving up on him, feels like a total bust right now.
Yes,
so
true.
I almost feel like you got to go offensive line.
But that's another way. If you're in the front office and you're thinking, okay, if you've narrowed it down between Bowers and an offensive lineman, then you could think, how easily can we get this same production out of free agency versus taking this player in the draft as a draft pick? I would think it's harder to find if you think Brock Bowers can be an elite level tight end number one, like Mark Andrews, Sam Laporta kind of guy. If you think that's who he can be, then it's much harder to find that in free agency. It's basically impossible, honestly, to find a Pro Bowl level, all pro level, elite tight end in free agency. It's easier to acquire that in free agency. It's easier to address an offensive lineman in free agency than it is to get an all pro tight end. And the difference in an all pro offensive lineman and an above average or a serviceable or whatever offensive lineman versus an all pro tight end and a Foster Moreau or a Juwan Johnson, it's a huge gap. So what Matt's laying out here, I would still lean tight end because I think it's more impactful on the field and it's harder to find elsewhere. Whereas offensive linemen can be found elsewhere. We see it every season. We see every season teams have offensive line issues. They go to free agency. They pull people. How many times do you hear this? Where, oh, this guy came off the street, barely even practiced, and he's an all-pro this year. Happens all the time in the offensive line. All the time. So, again, it's going to be hard for our evaluators in our front office to find those guys, but you can find that offensive line-wise. You can't find that with tight ends. So, the potential higher for a Brock Bowers versus whichever offensive lineman we'd be targeting.
At 14. But Dane Brugler does have the Saints going offensive line in round 2 at 45 with Kansas Jayhawks offensive lineman Dominic Pooney, who played both guard and tackle. So
same thing. What's the difference between whoever you're going to draft there at 14, if he's an offensive lineman, with the difference in the second round? I would assume the difference between Bowers and the second round tight end is massive. Massive. And you have to factor in, too, ladies and gentlemen, we have a ton invested in Derek Carr. They want to give Derek Carr as much as possible to succeed right now. So you bring in a new offensive coordinator, you get him a Brock Bowers. I like it.
So that's a swing guy that can play inside out for you, and you're going to need to use a high draft pick on an offensive lineman, and you're probably going to have to spend in free agency on the offensive line this year as well because you're likely losing 3 starters.
You definitely will have to address it in free agency. It's just how many, how much. I would say all of them. Bring them in. Let it rip in free agency.
After this year. Well, we're not sure what's going to happen with Ryan Ramczyk. Hopefully, he gets healthy this offseason, comes back healthy, and is ready to roll. And then you're just looking to replace the left side of your line with Pete and Hurst. And maybe Trevor Penning, the light switch comes on this year, and maybe he can be a guard for you, and you're looking for a franchise left.
Spoiler alert. It's not.
Tackle, and maybe that player's there in the top half of round 1. But the single biggest flashing lights, glaring need for the New Orleans Saints, I think has to be like 1A, 1B, has got to be offensive line. But Jared,
I use this example all the time with the Bengals. The flashing light, red light need after Joe Burrow's rookie season was offensive line. It was flashing. It was neons. Offensive line, protect franchise quarterback. Quarterback was just injured. Keep him upright. He's getting sacked a lot. But then they had Jamar Chase. And they made the decision of who's going to be more impactful on the field, Jamar Chase or Penei Sewell. And they took Jamar Chase. And you know what happened to Joe Burrow? He was getting lit up. Pressure, sacks, wasn't pretty. And what did they do? They went into free agency. They restructured their offensive line. The rest is history. So when you have someone who you believe can be so impactful as a Jamar Chase, or if you think Brock Bowers is at the level of could be Mark Andrews, could be Sam Laporta, could be Travis Kelce. I hesitated to say Travis Kelce because I think he's the greatest tight end to ever live. You know, you never want to put that on a rookie, but if he can be a Sam Laporta type, a Mark Andrews type, high level, even a George Kittle type, it's hard to pass that up. I like to think of draft comps. Like, think about a player's ceiling and then put that player, whoever's in the ceiling, into the draft. So let's say, who do you think right now is the best left tackle in the NFL? Let's say Trent Williams. If you're the Saints and you can draft, and they're rookies, so think about these two players when they're rookies. You can either draft Trent Williams or Travis Kelce. Who are you drafting? You're drafting Travis Kelce. You're drafting him. You're not drafting Trent Williams. If you have to pick between those two and the position the Saints are in moving forward, who would you rather have? Whose career? Who? Whatever. I don't care how good Trent Williams is. I can find someone who's marginally a little bit worse, but serviceable, can survive on the offensive line. If you give me a chance at getting a Travis Kelce, I'm taking him. And that's what the Bengals did. The Bengals looked at it and said, Penei Sewell can be Trent Williams, but Jamar Chase can be Calvin Johnson. Give me a shot at this wide receiver. More impactful. We'll figure out the offensive line. Even if we don't have an A-plus left tackle, we'll find a B. We'll find a B left tackle, and it'll be fine. It'll be okay. But having a shot at an A-plus wide receiver or an A-plus tight end, I don't want to replace that with a B. That's a big drop-off. A-plus wide receiver to a B wide receiver or tight end, whatever, skill player, running back, however you want to put any kind of offensive player, like offensive skill player. Huge drop-off. A-plus lineman to a B lineman, not that big of a drop-off. Feel me?
Versus there, you think he's an elite edge rusher, and those are so hard to come by. You see him there at 14, and you pull the trigger, it'd be hard to be upset with that as well. Hey,
yeah, same thing. If I could tell you, you could have Myles Garrett, or you can have TJ Watt, or you can have Penei Sewell or Zach Martin. Who are you taking? You're taking TJ Watt and Myles Garrett. It is what it is. Nice shirt, Matt. Thank you for watching, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate that. Let me know what you would do. Would you draft best player available or position of need? Give me some names. Who are you thinking? Brock Bowers, Keon Coleman, Jared Verse, Bo Nix. Get on down there. Get on down there. In the comment, I can't get over this outro. The shirt set up here. Get on down there in the comments below. I'll be down there reacting, reviewing, replying. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next video.